All right, back with more of your calls here on Open Line. I don't want to waste any time because we have about 14 full minutes here with our guest, Whitney Barkley-Denney, and we got a lot of callers on hold. As I promised, we're going to get right to those callers who are sharing their stories and their concerns. Wilma is up next on Open Line. Hi, Wilma.
Yes, hi, Rory, and thank you, Whitney, for being on the call tonight. And my question is, I really don't know how to unfold this, but quickly, I started out with student loans and just knew at some point once I graduated, I would fare well enough to pay my loans back. But I won't say I was encouraged, but I was asked about consolidation, and I consolidated. And over the years, with changes in employment and hardships and forbearances, that consolidation has snowballed. And my student loans now are like a balloon payment. And as John said, there's no way I would ever be able to pay that down. So I was just wondering if there was any comment towards consolidated loans that are now just unaffordable.
Sure, good question. Good question. Now, while we're hearing so many different scenarios here, Whitney.
Yeah. So I don't know if Wilma consolidated out of her federal loans into private loans. A lot of times that is advice that's given that just doesn't work for people. Because as broken as the federal loan system is, one of the things that's good about it are all of the repayment plans that it offers. And, you know, the ability, if you do need to stop and forbear those loans for a while because of employment problems or other personal, life issues that come up, you can do that under a federal loan. You can't if you consolidate out of it into a private loan. Consolidation on federal loans is a little trickier because it is required for certain programs like public service loan forgiveness. You would have to be consolidated into it for a direct federal loan in order to get that. So unfortunately, without knowing a little bit more about Wilma's actual situation, I can't speak too much to consolidation other than to say that, private loans are sort of offered as this great alternative to borrowers when they get out of school, when for most people, they're better off sticking in that federal loan.
Sure. All right, let's go to Michael next. Hi, Michael. Welcome. Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, yeah. So I kind of have more of a comment this time.
Yeah.
Kind of the issue I see, in going back to the tax thing, I don't see the government being very incentivized to reform any kind of tax legislation on that, because if you cancel the student loan debt, you said $1.5 trillion in federal student loan debt. If they cancel that debt, then that debt's gone. Well, how are they going to get the money back? The other way I see them doing it is maybe raising interest rates and issuing, taking on more debt through Treasury securities, which will carry over into the housing market anyway, make it just as expensive to borrow a house or buy a house as it is now when you have debt. And so, the other thing too is they have to do that to fight inflation. So I don't see the benefit and how it would end up benefiting the economy in the long run if you put $1.5 trillion, let's say, into the economy after we just put, $5 trillion with these stimulus packages. They're going to have to raise rates anyway.
Okay.
So don't you see this kind of being counterproductive? I don't see the incentive in the government changing any kind of tax liability. I don't see them being incentivized doing it. I don't see how in the short run maybe, but in the long run it's going to catch up.
Okay.
With us doing that economically.
All right, let's listen in.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I'm not an economist, so I can't answer that probably as fully as Michael seems to want or to discuss it. But I can say that, I think the incentive question is a good one when it comes to particularly the tax incentive or making sure that there's no tax liability on this. However, all indications that I've heard are that they would make sure that people don't have to pay taxes on this. Were this cancellation too.
Which makes sense, for sure. Lucy, one of our regulars, is online too. Hey, Lucy, how are you?
Hey, how you doing?
Doing
Listen,
well.
I don't mean to sound like a know-it-all. I'm not an economist either, but 40 years ago, we said that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And when you keep adding up debt where it's over $1 trillion down on the school loan, that devalues your dollar. That means your house and your car is more expensive, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. It doesn't take a brain scientist. They can clear your debt but you got to see how you got here. There are a couple of documentaries. I think one is Inside Job, Too Big to Fail, and there was a Frontline piece that they did on PBS called the Card Game about credit cards.
Yeah.
You need to see that. You need to understand that the collapse that we almost collapsed the entire planet on in 2007 and 8 was on derivatives. And where do they get derivatives? They set all this up or packages off of Wall Street because they know you'll never be able to pay it back, and you just pay interest. And you really need to look at your immigration policy that they've been trying to pass down for almost 20 years, where they say no more unskilled workers. All we are going to allow into this country are highly skilled, highly educated immigrants. Well, why are you going to college when you can't get a job now? You're making a $70,000 loan, and they're not going to hire you, but they're going to hire somebody. And I'm not dinging immigrants, and they're going to give them a visa for life. So if you're not paying attention to what all is going on in D.C., and you don't have to be a political scientist, wiping out the debt's not going to fix a problem. I paid 2.5% interest, $10 a credit hour, and my school loan was paid off in 2 years, where most people's were, and they were given 5 years and at the most 4% interest. That shot through the roof in 10 years because they decided, Ronald Reagan said, that school loans were an entitlement like welfare, and they turned it over to Wall Street and set this thing loose. That's all I wanted to say. I feel sorry for these kids. I really do. It's criminal.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Lucy. Thanks for. Sometimes you just need to vent, no doubt about it. I want to get right to a couple more calls. Deborah's up next. Hey, Deborah. How are you?
Hello. How
Hi.
you doing?
Doing well. Go ahead. What's on your mind?
I don't like to believe everything I read, but I read where government officials like the senators and people like that, children don't have to pay, or they exempt from paying student loans. And I don't understand how that works for people like us who are on fixed income. For instance, like my husband, we got a parent student loan for both our girls, and he only draws Social Security, and they're trying to make him pay $500 and something a month on these loans, and he can't afford to do that.
Right. Right.
And I don't
Absolutely.
see how these government officials can be exempt. Their children can be exempt, and we have to pay.
All right. Hang on right there. Whitney, I'm not sure if that's the case, but do you know about that?
You know, I would imagine that the reason why most government officials, kids don't pay student loans is because they're able to pay cash for them to go to school. But I think that the caller does bring up a really good point about Parent Plus loans. So these are loans after your child or your grandchild has exhausted their eligibility for federal loans, which is more than $30,000 for most people, or $40,000. Then the parents can step in and get a loan to help continue sending them to school. These loans are high interest. They are not eligible for income-driven repayment, for public service loan forgiveness, for any of the discharges that we talked about other than discharging at death. And so they really become a problem for parents who are expected, to pay this off, oftentimes, as the caller said, as they age into retirement and onto fixed incomes.
And, let's say, obviously it's going to be a long-term fix before it can fix this, but until that happens, how do we get the word out like a buyer beware to these parents before they sign on the dotted line? I know that they want to help their kids, they want to keep their kids in school, but you want them to read the fine print and understand just what it is they're getting into, which can be financially devastating.
It's so difficult. And again, I think it goes back to the idea that we've had for so long in this country that, education, and I don't want to say that education is just about making more money, right? It's important for so many other things, in becoming a well-rounded thinker and in being able to do those critical thinking skills. But it really does put parents between a rock and a hard place, because we know how important higher education is. And yet so many folks just can't afford it. And I think, your caller a few callers ago was correct. We see this coming, and we see this only getting more inequitable and, really coming to a space where only the richest people can afford to send their kids to school. And that's certainly not what we want to be as a country.
John is our last caller in this segment here. John, we just have about a minute and a half. Go ahead, sir. John, you there?
Is this me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you for taking the call.
Sure.
My son is a junior, named after me, and I'm getting calls about the student loans and trying to get everything financially straight with him, tax code and everything like that, but he refuses to believe that. And I show him on my phone, I show him daily and weekly. The thing that made me angry is Bessie DeVos set up her, and she didn't excuse a lot of these loans like it should have. And Trump knows she was not adequate for the job. And my son has really struggled. And luckily, God shined a light on him. He was able to get a home, but that student loan carries. You can't file bankruptcy on it. You can't never do anything about it. And he's been working for Metro Public Schools, and they should have gave him a break because he is working in the public sector and the government assisted job. You take these foreign countries like Russia and all of them, if as long as you're working for them, they don't have no bills. They keep your housing and everything.
Sure.
But I don't understand how America got itself like that.
Yeah.
And the teachers here in Metro is supposed to get a 10% discount on any housing if they purchase a home. But people don't realize the knowledge of that.
Yeah.
So I'm really angry how it got out of hand.
John, I got to stop you right there. I'm sorry because we're up against a break, but that just kind of highlights, kind of bookends the frustration, Whitney, that so many face. We do have to wrap up because we're out of time, but Whitney, thank you so much, and we're going to have you back sometime as this progresses and steps are taken to fix the problem. We would love to have you back. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
I'd love to come back. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll be back right after this.